You know, I think often about why we even know the name Michael Brown. It's a pretty generic name. The people of Ferguson, the people who lived on Canfield Drive, came out of their apartment buildings and they said, this is unjust. And they took out their phones and they wouldn't stop talking about it. And they forced the eyes of the world to see Michael Brown's body on the ground, to see the tear gas, and to hear the rubber bullets, and to see the fires. And that is what made us all pay attention to Ferguson.
Fortunately, last week it was the same old, damn, that's fucked up. And this week it's like, what can we do?
I was waiting on my best friend to get off work so we could go together. And we went like maybe 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night on August 9th. And there were still like a lot of people outside. And what I heard was there were like these little small black babies, like 2, 3 years old. And apparently they had just been outside all day. And some of them were like, I saw Mike get killed.
The Ferguson protests were some of the longest sustained protests in American history. And I think that the reason behind that was that you had so many people who were so frustrated, who were so angry, who were so upset that, you know, this stops today was the message.
This a battleground where Mike Brown died at. We out here. We fighting for justice. We gonna be here. We gonna be here. Fuck the police. We out here. We in St. Louis.
This our hero.
That's what we doing, baby.
Louis fucking Missouri.
No justice. No peace. No justice. No peace.
It was so St. Louis. So it was authentic to who we are as black people from here, but we absolutely didn't look like what I feel people were expecting. We didn't sound like it either. So the protests, we would not be playing The Change Is Gonna Come. They're playing Fuck the Police by Lil Boosie all day.
In a sense, it almost felt like a celebration. I do remember the song of the day, of the entire trip, was definitely Young Thug Lifestyle. The song had just come out. I mean, I heard this song everywhere. It was us. It was young people who came out to voice, you know, their displeasure with what happened, but didn't need it to be so somber and so structured. It was just like, yo, we all feel the same way. Let's all come out to, you know, this one strip on West Florissant and let's be together.
What I remember is that the daytime crowds and the nighttime crowds were very different. In those early days, you had a lot of families, young people, women, children, just all kinds of groups to protest peacefully. At night, especially late night, around 10 or beyond, it was a different crowd. Younger, rowdier, looking to start some trouble. And you had some folks who were exploiting the situation and the chaos for their own, you know, agenda.
This trip is on fire.
Burning up,
on fire. Wow.
Step back, step back, step back.
I ended up landing the evening of August 11th. Now by then, there had been 3 nights of protests. The Quick Trip gas station had burned down the night before, and when I got off the airplane, the first place I went was to the first press conference held by Michael Brown's family. This part of the city is more black, and there are low-income residents, but we're in little cul-de-sacs, and there are kids playing basketball in their driveway. You know, it's kind of suburban housing, and so we pull up on one of these streets, and there's a line of local, young people and residents, and about a block away is a line of police officers, and they're yelling at each other, and the police are saying, go home, and the young people are saying, this is our home, why don't y'all go home? We live here.
FTP! Fuck the police! FTP! Fuck the police! FTP! Fuck the police!
We hadn't experienced anything like that. There's few places have. And all I knew was that if that crowd gets close enough or too close to law enforcement, where they're barricaded in it, there's a possibility of violence. It was a potentially volatile situation. So, several of us stood there in the middle to try and just calm things.
There was this one really crazy night. We actually jumped over some strange person. We jumped over their fence because there was like helicopters up above us. The National Guard was coming up West Florissant. We were on one of the little off streets, and there was police cars coming up the street also. So we were like, we gotta get the fuck out of Dodge. So we jump over this person's fence. It's like 10 of us in these people's backyard. On the ground, like everyone's just like, shut the fuck up. So, and then there's a National Guard truck driving up an alleyway. So that we're literally just like face down in somebody's dirt. And on the other side of the street, another friend of mine was hiding in their car.
One thing that we have never really touched on in the aftermath of all this is the class division in St. Louis. We talk a lot about race now, but the class division, which includes a division among middle-class African Americans and poor African Americans, especially like the ones that live in the area where Mike Brown was killed. And you will find, you know, some of the things and some of the comments that you would expect to come out of white St. Louisans are shared by middle-class black St. Louisans.
My family, being from the South and having lived through the Civil Rights Movement, they know what can happen to black people who choose to protest or choose to resist in any way. And they just didn't want anything to happen to me. So it was just pure safety for them. Outside of that, you just had people who were like, well, he did it. And it wouldn't even be, you know, who you would expect. Still had some people who were black who would say, well, I don't know why y'all down there, you know, it's not gonna change nothing anyway. And one of the biggest differences between Ferguson and the Civil Rights Movement is that we have social media. So we didn't need to print off like in a printing room and pass out flyers. It was just sharing a simple hashtag or sharing memes with information of where to meet us at a park or like, you know, where we're gonna meet up to go plan an action or something. And if there are only people who can't be present at a protest at a certain time, but they can hit a retweet button or share or make a correction online or, you know, just have the dialogue with people, that stuff does matter.
What we also know is that black people have an outsized amount of power on social media. We create the culture, which means we create the internet culture. And so in moments like this, moments like Ferguson, moments like Trayvon Martin or Sandra Bland, or when the Charleston 9 are killed, right? Black people can use these platforms to testify and to force these stories and accounts in front of the faces of people who otherwise would never have to see them.
We kept it consistent for about 2 or 3 years, with or without media attention or presence. But by then, so many of us had our own platforms. We didn't need the media's presence here to still cause an uproar, and we would kind of force the conversation anyway.
The election of Wesley Bell in St. Louis County cannot be overstated. Like, that was a big deal. There was also a reflection of a frustration with the previous prosecutor, not just among African Americans, but even among white St. Louisans. How he handled, especially that grand jury announcement that night, that angered a lot of folks.
The people got tired of Mama Color, you know, the way he does things. So Wesley came and he promised the people, hey, I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to redo everything. He's following the law.
What we're doing is for those nonviolent low-level offenders that we know progress to the violent offenders, we're trying to catch them down here when they're at the nonviolent stage. We know the research shows that if you address the underlying root cause, they are significantly less likely to reoffend. So from my job, from a public safety concern, that makes us safer. People can be productive members of society who can get jobs, they can help take care of their families. Fortunately, out of tragedy comes opportunity, and I think we don't want to look back 10 years from now and look at this as a lost opportunity.
Everybody has a role to play in this. Media has a role to play. Businesses, people with wealth, they have a role to play. It's not going to be a single solution that's going to bring around this change, and it's not going to be a single person at all. A lot of people are waiting for a savior to come, and that savior ain't coming. You know, it's going to be all of us collectively working together for a common goal.
Sometimes it's like you got to just teach people how to protest, and sometimes people need to see an example. You've seen the March on Washington for women's rights happen after this. I think you've seen the March for gun reform after this. A lot of these marches and rallies have been led by young people, and I think that a lot of people will look back on the Mike Brown situation as like an example of how people can come together, use their voice, they can find and build with other people who share similar interests. And I think in a way there was a blueprint that was built.
I want people to know that St. Louis really showed up the first day and every day the exact same way that St. Louis would always show up. We were authentically ourselves and didn't change for nobody. And I think we will do it again.
Before we get to Sandra Bland, before we get to Freddie Gray, before we get to Tamir Rice and Philando Castile and Alton Sterling and Keith Lamont Scott, and the names go on forever, right? People loved to hold out Ferguson because, oh, we're not like Ferguson. We're not like those people over there. I mean, that stuff's crazy that you saw on the news, but we don't kill any black people here in our town. There was a desire to believe that there was something uniquely racist or uniquely screwed up about this little backwater place in Missouri, when in reality, the story of Ferguson is the story of America. We all live in a Ferguson because we all live in places where if you have black skin, the likelihood of an interaction with a police officer going sideways is increased from that if you are a white person. Ferguson was the moment that forced the eyes of the country and the eyes of the world to look at those issues. And so, much like Emmett Till or Rodney King, I can't imagine a time where we don't remember the name Michael Brown.